So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us and coming to participate in this very special presentation. Before we get started, please be aware that Trent is actually recording this presentation, so from a privacy problem, if there's any sort of challenge with that, please let us know, because it could potentially be available online via the ALS Society. So first off, a couple of other things. There is a donation box for the ALS Society up at the back there. And we also have a journal that if any of you would like to put a note in it for Barry, you're more than welcome. Thank you. So firstly, I would like to welcome Sarah from the ALS Society. And Sarah's going to talk a wee bit about ALS and some of the challenges with it. So welcome, Sarah. Thank you for coming on such a snowy day.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for being here with us today and giving us the opportunity to raise some awareness for ALS. So my name is Sarah Maguire and I am the Regional Manager for ALS Canada covering Simcoe County, Muskoka and Central Ontario. My role is to work with clients who have been diagnosed with ALS from the point of diagnosis throughout the journey. I'm there to help navigate the healthcare system, to link my clients and their families with various supports in the community, to help them along the journey, and I'm also an advocate to make sure that my clients have the care that they need. The ALS Society provides an equipment program so that we're able to provide various assistive devices such as the power wheelchair that you see here, bathroom aids, mobility aids, communication devices, so that clients can continue to be independent and safe in their homes for as long as possible. We also run support groups. I facilitate 2 support groups in my region, and that's to make sure that clients know that they're not alone on this journey. As you can imagine, I'm sure that it's very isolating in many cases, not just physically, but emotionally as well. And we also provide resources. So I do have a few brochures at the back, and I can also provide any sort of ongoing support and education that you might need individually or as a group as well. I won't go too much into what the disease is right now because Barry has some really great slides that's going to describe that. So suffice to say that it's a pleasure working with Barry, and I'm very happy to be here to support you today, and I will now pass it over to you and let you take the floor.
No. Oh, yes. Oh, I'm live.
Not allowed to speak yet. So the Webster definition of courage is mental or moral strength to venture, persevere, and withstand danger, fear, or difficulty. As Canadians, we exhibit courage every day. Our armed forces, police, and first responders who face danger and risk constantly. Terry Fox, who despite having his leg amputated, courageously undertook his Marathon of Hope, raising awareness and funds for cancer research, and continues to be celebrated and recognised every year. Rick Hansen, the man in motion, crossing not only this country, but travelling around the world, raising awareness for people with physical disabilities. Gord Downey and the Tragically Hip, raising awareness for brain cancer and concurrently the struggles faced by Indigenous peoples. And more recently here at Waypoint, during our core values celebration, the gentleman from the Hero Centre and Kathy Maurice, having the courage to talk publicly about the challenges they faced and the support they received on their journey to recovery. And today, it's my pleasure to introduce Barry Law. Many of you will have worked with Barry in his role as a social worker on several of the programs at Waypoint. Or you may have had the opportunity to hear him speak at various workshops and panels around the community in the past. However, today, Barry is here to talk about being on the other side of the table, being a recipient of healthcare and living with a life-altering disease. So please welcome Barry Law.
Okay, so the microphone is on, right? Usually I ask, can people hear me at the back? Although I'm guessing that's a yes. Okay, so reality check. Is this actually really happening? I worked at Waypoint, and now I'm up here with ALS talking about it. yeah, I guess it is happening. It's surreal, really, for me. Yeah, it's nerve-wracking. It's very nerve-wracking in many ways. So what I'm going to do is talk, first of all, introduction, and I'm going to talk about my story. And I'm also going to talk about the importance of caregivers and for raising awareness of ALS. And the goal of this is to talk about what the experience has been like for me, what I've learned being on the other side of the table, and also to raise awareness for ALS. And I also just want to thank Waypoint for putting this on. It's a great opportunity to create awareness for the disease. So I'm more than happy to do that. Yeah, okay, that's page 2. Yeah, that's page 1. Okay, just look at my notes here. Life before the disease. So one other quick thing too, just to mention, I was diagnosed with ALS for the first time in March of 2015, which needless to say was a shock to my system. I thought it was a back problem. Everybody thought it was a back problem. But the diagnosis was confirmed in May of 2015. So I've had it, by the way, I gotta make sure I watch the clock. It's 25 minutes, right? It's 25 minutes?
Okay, Barry, we're productive.
Okay, yeah.
We're not going to cut you off.
Okay. Don't worry, we only scheduled it for 4 hours, so don't worry about it. You get a 5-minute break, so don't worry about it. So that's the diagnosis piece. So life before the disease. In general, I earned a Bachelor of Social Work. Social workers rock, by the way. How can I not say that? And everybody else does, don't get me wrong. So I got a Bachelor of Social Work in 2007 at the University of Windsor. And there's a picture up there on the right, and that's me graduating for my BSW. That's 2007. And then in 2008, I went back for my master's degree, and I got that. And then I went right into mental health. And I lived a very active lifestyle. It was mountain biking. It was skiing. I was an active person. Swimming in Georgian Bay. I have a house that's not very far from the bay, and yeah, this area is really nice. I came up here from Windsor. Yeah. If anybody's been to Windsor, you know it's good. It's good up here, you know. Even better would be a snowbird. So, so I'm thinking next slide probably. Was there is the clip? Yeah, is it? Yeah. So there's a clip here I want to just set up. Maybe Holly just briefly set it up, and then I can just talk about the introduction to this clip. So yeah. So for this clip right here. What I also thought about doing for this talk is just going right on into the disease, right? Like get the hard stuff out of the way first. The elephant in the room, besides that I'm sitting here like this and I'm pretty weak, is that power wheelchair. I don't know how they got it in my house. It was like, how are you gonna get that thing in there? But they got it in there. So my thinking is more or less just go right into the disease and talk about the parts that are not so good. I mean, the elephant in the room maybe is ALS is horrible. It's an awful disease. It eats away at you slowly. And to go into what it does, there's a doctor at the end of this clip that goes into what it actually does. And there's also a beginning story of a clip of a young lady who's talking. She was diagnosed at 26, which is very young. The average age is around mid-50s, so she's very young. And I have what's called limb onset ALS. It started in this leg. People at outpatients, anybody at outpatients knows that, because it started with a limp. So the other type is called bulbar onset, which means it starts with your speech. It's not fun stuff. This is not fun stuff at all. And it's very frightening, I think, to a lot of people. I found that out. And it's frightening to me, you know? So this clip shows bulbar onset, it shows a family reaction, and it shows the doctor's take on it, so.
You know, it started out with, she needs help cutting her food. Okay, you get over it, you deal with it, you move on. And then it's like, okay, she needs help unzipping her pants to go to the bathroom. Okay, learn how to do it, deal with it, move on.
To lose that autonomy and your independence, nobody gives that up easily. You hang on to that as long as you can.
I was a competitive gymnast all growing up. Yeah, I was all done. If I thought hard enough and I worked hard enough, I could do anything. But now, it doesn't matter how bad I want it. it's not going to help me, and it's not going to change what's happening to my body. A year ago, I could still lift my arm, and I could put on sunscreen. I could wash my hair. And now,
I really believe this will be cured someday, you know. What I don't know is if there's enough time for my daughter. And I really, you know, kind of hope and pray there is, but we're fighting the clock.
ALS researchers are fighting the clock too, racing to find an effective treatment. To see what progress they've made, I visited the world's first research center solely focused on this disease, the ALS Therapy Development Institute. Dr. Steve Perrin gave me a candid explanation of what ALS patients are up against. What happens when you get this disease?
Unrelenting muscle loss from wherever you get your first symptoms to spreading across the body. The motor neurons that control your movements, the brain of the cell is up in your spinal cord. It sends these processes down out of your spinal cord into your muscles to where it actually innervates the tissue. When that nerve pulls back, the muscle no longer has any signaling from the brain, if you will, on how to move, and your muscles progressively just atrophy throughout your entire body, and that's ultimately what ends up causing paralysis and eventually death. Yet your central nervous system in your brain is, for the most part in most patients, unaffected, meaning you have full cognitive function. So you know exactly what's going on around you, and yet you have no ability to communicate, speak, or move.
Is there even a viable treatment for it right now?
There is no effective treatment or a cure today. There's some on the horizon. We're optimistic we're going to get there.
ALS TDI received only $4 out of the $220 million raised by the Ice Bucket Challenge, which they immediately channeled.
Okay, so hard clip to watch. I know it was for me when I looked at it. And by the way, just ignore the last part on the thing about the Ice Bucket Challenge money. It's video editing software. Sometimes it's just but no, ignore that part. The part that really hit me though is when the mother said it's the loss of autonomy and independence. And I found for me that that's far more frightening than anything else is. I mean, even the end, it's a tough thing to talk about, although what it does to you, it's horrifying. So that's the reality of what the disease does. So I get the idea of that you want to hang on to your independence as long as you can. I mean, you want to be able to get up and walk and go, like, walk where you want to, you know? It's just you don't have those options anymore. So I want to talk a little bit more about hopefully something that's more enlightening than that. Maybe that's educational, but enlightening, maybe, I don't know if that's the word. So I'll talk a little bit about grieving. Unrelenting muscle loss. That is exactly what this is. It just keeps eating away at you. And the hardest part that I have found in dealing with this is that you get to a point and suddenly, not usually suddenly, the disease creeps up on you. You don't really know what's going on, but it's like you start to use remote control, and it's like the remote control is starting to get harder to hang on to. Why is that? Well, I know why it is. But now pressing the buttons is getting harder. So when you look at all that part, the grieving is ongoing. It doesn't stop. So when you look at the stages of grief, like, okay, memory check. Denial, bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance. Did I miss anything? Okay, so it doesn't affect my mind. Okay, that's good. Well, it has, but so in terms of the grieving, though, that's a very big part of it, and it's ongoing. And I've also thought, too, that the other part of grieving that goes along with that is that I relate it to more or less like it's the stress levels of relating it to a glass of water. If it's sort of like 5 years ago, the water was 25% full, right? 20% stress, right? But now it's at 95% stress. So any stress on top of that with the disease, it's far more, the impact is far greater than what it used to be. So that's the part about grieving. And I also want to talk a little bit about identity. One of the most obvious things, I don't think you can really see the disease very much from here. Like you can see it, like the hands are kind of like this. It's kind of more gory part of it. I think you saw me move a little bit more, but it's there. And what I mean is it's visible. And what I found is that it's raised a lot of questions about what identity means to me and what it means overall. Because, yeah, I mean, this jacket right here, I used to wear this to Waypoint all the time. I used to wear it everywhere. It's one of my favorite jackets. And so in some ways, for me having it on right now, it's a way of how I found how I handle this disease. It's very personal. And in that sense, the grieving is less intense with this jacket on right now because you're connecting with an old part of myself that hasn't been lost yet. And so there's a visible disability, although the interest, let's say, of the outdoors, the interests of those have not changed. I still like the outdoors. None of that has changed. My values, my beliefs, some things have changed. Like my beliefs have definitely changed. Like, why me? Why did I get this? Did I do something wrong? Why? You know, that's where the anger comes from, it's complex. And I suppose in that way, relating this disease to mental health, yeah, it could be a 4-hour talk. It could be trauma, anxiety, depression, stress, it's all of it. Medication, like all of it applies. So that's the part about the identity part yeah. So the next part I want to talk about is control. And when I used to hear the word control, I used to think that control meant that you had control over other people. That's how I used to interpret it. Well, if you have the control, you're a manager, you know, you manage people, you're prime minister, you're whoever, right? You have authority over people. What I found though is that the control that I have, it's like the analogy of a deck of cards. It's like 5 years ago, the deck of cards it wasn't full. It's never been fully full. Let's say it's mostly full. And it's kind of like, but right now, it's the options that I have left, like the option of getting up and walking over and just going out, let's say, to Timmy's and grabbing coffee, that's not there. So you're dealing with a very limited, you're only dealing with a few cards with this. Like a few cards, that's it. So for me, maintaining that control of what I still have is vital. It's that important. And that's really, if there's one message that I can talk to, that's probably the most important thing I'd want to say at this talk, it's that. It's that important that you hang on to what you still have left. So that's the part about control. Yeah, outlook. So overall, I found that how do you keep a positive outlook with this experience? Like, how do you do that? And there are times when to say this becomes difficult, it does. It becomes very difficult. Having said that, though, I have found that there's a huge benefit to peer support. You know, when I used to work at Waypoint, you'd hear things about peer support. It's like now I really get it, because there are people I've connected with who also have this disease where it's like, they get it. I mean, 3,000 Canadians have this disease. That's not very many people. I mean, the Sunnybrook Clinic in Toronto, they have 500 patients. Where's Sarah? Where's Sarah? 500 patients, right? Yeah. So that's not a lot. That's serving up a pretty wide area of people. So it's a rare disease. So that's the outlook part. So I've recognized that. There's. I'm going to go to the next slide, Holly. So here's a quote: "You treat a disease, you win, you lose. You treat a person, I guarantee you, you'll win, no matter what the outcome." So probably the best way for me to put this is, when I think of that quote, yeah, I mean, going in here and coming in here, probably the most important part is that, or not the most important part, it's, oh, I lost my train of thought. I'll come back for a second. I don't want to be looked at like a disease. But having said that, though, if I saw somebody that I used to work with or I used to know looking like this, I would notice it's obvious. It's right here. It's in front of me. Like, it's obvious. It's visible. You can't, my voice, as far as I know, has been unaffected for the most part, which that is a good thing. It's hard to find positives in this, but that is definitely a positive, that I still can talk. Well, for most people, maybe, or some people. Maybe not everybody. If I'm here for 4 hours, I'm going to say, I hope he loses it. Well, no. Yeah, he's like, so, so the idea is where I'm going to, I get why people don't want to be looked at like they're a specimen, like they're a disease. And it goes back to that identity part, because really, from this is part of the personal experience. Everybody's interpretation of having this disease is different. People, what the disease does, how it progresses in people, it's going to be different. The age of diagnosis is all different. So from my point of view, if people connect to this body, which is, they're connecting with a decaying body. So if they look at me like a specimen, like, what's going on with you, Barry? Or, like, it just, if you feel in some ways that there's a lot of attention focused on the disease itself, it's relating and identifying and attaching to a horrible disease and a decaying body. And it's not attaching to who I am. So as an example, my neurologist in Toronto, whenever I see him, he always says, how you doing, Barry? What's going on in your life? What's new? We talk. We just talk like I am right now, for the most part, right? He connects with me like I'm a person, not like I'm a person. I think I am a person anyways. I don't know. This, like I said, this doesn't mess with your mind. I don't think it does, but sometimes you wonder. But he makes the connection first. So because he's a neurologist, I mean, of course he has to look. Of course he has to check out strength testing. But he's already made that connection first. And it's, now that I'm on the other side of the table, it matters a lot. It does. I mean, I found for me that it's sort of like, there were certain things that used to happen, or certain things that I would do as a social worker here, or say as a social worker here. And I don't think I realized, going back to just briefly the control part, I don't think I realized how much control I had as a social worker. You do. You have a lot of power as a social worker in any role that's here. When you're dealing with highly vulnerable clients. And am I vulnerable, not being able to get in the world? Sure I am. Yeah, I am. And yeah, so that's the specimen section. So the next part is about the support part. And so to talk about a little bit about the therapeutic relationship. Yeah, I remember hearing that at Waypoint, and through mental health training and social work, it's the therapeutic relationship that matters more than anything else does. It really does. And I found that to be really true. Like, it does matter a lot. And let's say, for example, let's say I met a counselor, let's say, and I started talking to that person, and let's say they started questioning me, well, why didn't you get that power wheelchair, Barry? Why not? Well, I'm just not ready for it yet. Well, why not? You should be ready for it. Why not? Like, right off the bat, it doesn't matter, like, how much training there is, what the certificates there are, what it is. The relationship is broken, and I just won't see that person again. Because they've lost trust, and they're imposing, and it doesn't work. So for me, the idea of the therapeutic relationship, it matters. It really does. Hold on one second here. I'm looking at my notes. So, by the way, just as kind of a disclaimer, I don't know, it's a disclaimer more or less. There's a couple of times I'm going to mention a couple of names. Well, I've asked these people for their permission. I'm not putting them on the spot. So with that said, I'm going to put Sarah on the spot. Where's Sarah again? Geez, you'd think I know by now where you are. So I'll give you an example. Like, Sarah and I talked earlier this year, and I gave her feedback, and I said, I like the idea of planting seeds. I'm good with that. And so the last time she came and she visited and we talked. She said, how would you feel about doing this, a certain thing? And I said, well, I'm not ready for that quite yet. And she said, okay, just let me know when you are. If you are ready, and if you are ready and when you're ready, let me know. Now, for me, it's a very simple conversation, and it only took probably, a few minutes, probably only. But having said that, what did she communicate to me in just a few minutes? Number one, she trusted me. She trusted my ability. She, most importantly though, like she heard me. She was listening to me. And she wasn't, like my thing is like, don't walk ahead of me and don't walk behind me, walk with me through this. Because if you walk too fast, then it doesn't work. And this is actually another part of the talk, so I'll have to take that part out because I'm inserting this. My experience has been that the worker has to maybe adapt to the changes that I'm going through. They have to move at my pace, more or less. And I found that to be really important. And when I think in terms of mental health here, depression, or whatever the mental health condition is, yeah, I mean, I really get that it's like if somebody who has depression, who is severely depressed, for anybody who's not depressed, walking across the street getting a coffee is no big deal. Just let's go grab a coffee, no big deal. But if you're severely depressed, that might be really hard to do that. So I think that's the part where it ties in with a lot of stuff. It ties in with control, that the idea that you don't have that. So the caring part. So the other part I wanted to mention too is what I found too in being on the other side of the table is that it's a mutual giving. Like I'm giving to people. Like I remember being taught this in social work, that when you're with a person, when I was a social worker, when you're with a client, they are giving something to you. They're opening up to you, and they're also giving to me. And it's a relationship. It's a working relationship, and that it's a mutual caring, and it has to be developed over time. And in terms of the respect part, it ties in with a whole lot of parts to me. Respect ties in with almost everything. It ties in with boundaries. It ties in with everything, really. And to me, it's part of the heart of what makes a therapeutic relationship work, or for that matter, a friendship work. You know, respect people's boundaries, respect people's right to their autonomy, right? Autonomy, that's a big shot word, isn't it? Independence is less big shot, but autonomy, that's kind of nice. Right now, let me turn over to page 2. Oh, confidentiality first. Yeah, that's page 2. All right, here we go. I still can't believe this is happening. Okay, so in confidentiality, one example I can give is I didn't realize, I was taught in social work that confidentiality is important. Well, of course it was. Of course it was talked about, right? Having said that, though, I really understand why there's a code of ethics there for social work. If that's not there to protect the client and the worker, it's risky. When you get into a decision, you're stuck in a wheelchair like that. You get to a point where when you're talking about what you're saying, hold on a second. I lost my thought for a second. I think I'm just kind of stunned in some ways that I'm still here. But so when you're opening up yourself to somebody, and there's the confidentiality part, I get why the code of ethics is there. And there is a social worker I've been seeing now for many months, since earlier this year. We've talked about a lot of stuff. If I heard, let's say that this person, I'm making this up. I'm just making this up. Let's say, for example, somebody had said to me, so-and-so, right? I said, yeah. Well, she works with you, and we were out at the bar, and she was talking about what it was like working with you. Now, I've worked with her probably about 8 months or so. Same with Sarah. We've worked for 2.5 years. That's a long time. I've never worked at Waypoint for anybody for 2.5 years. So if that social worker to do that were to break confidentiality, that can cause damage. Like, that's where it's an interpretation. It's what it does. That's been my experience, though, that's very dangerous, because the other part of the danger, too, is what are the odds now of me seeking help from somebody else if that confidentiality has been broken? It's risky. It's very risky. So, yeah, I think that's the piece on confidentiality. Actually, I'm doing pretty good for time. Yeah, okay, good. I know it's just, I don't know, It's kind of like, for me, I think there's that part of me where it's like I've attended presentations before, and it's kind of like, this person's still talking? Are you kidding me? It's 1:30, and he said he was a 30-minute talk. Like, we got stuff to do here. So with the ice bucket challenge, So this is hopefully more enlightening part of this presentation. Just a little bit about the Ice Bucket Challenge. I'm no expert on it. I've had it done. I'm in there somewhere. I don't know where. I have an idea, but it's hard to see me. The Ice Bucket Challenge did an enormous amount for ALS. It's done more since Lou Gehrig's farewell speech in 1939. So this is a challenge that has been widely ignored for over 100, what's the calculation on that? Well, since 1939, whatever that is, right? So it's been ignored for a long time, probably because the incidence or the rate of, there's so few people that have it. And so it did a whole lot for people. And I remember some of the stats from the US. I don't have Canadian stats, although some of the stats from the US are that I think it's in 2013 in the US, there was $23 million that was raised. In 2014, the Ice Bucket Challenge was launched, and the donations to the ALS Society in the US jumped to 115 million. So from 23 million to 150, and that's in the US alone. That's not globally. So all that money goes into research, you know, and yeah, I mean, I get that. I get why equipment is important. When I was first diagnosed, I mean, I was so mobile enough to just walk around. I had a limp, but I was mobile enough to do that. And yeah, so it did an enormous amount, and it brought in a lot of money, and there's the equipment, and most importantly, it's research. And it's like research equals money equals a cure. I mean, it's how it works. It's how things happen. So I just also wanted to mention as well, speaking of mentioning names, where's Ruth? There she is. Ruth, you could not have handled that better. The way that outpatients did that, Ruth and I talked at the time of diagnosis, and we talked a lot. She was an incredible support, and she arranged the Ice Bucket Challenge, but the entire outpatients team right there did it. And it's one of those days that you just never forget. You never forget it, because it had that much of an impact in your life that people actually did that for you. Or, yeah. So, yeah. There's no such thing as perfectionism, Ruth, although this is pretty frickin' close to me. Pretty close. And I also just wanted to mention, too, that I also really appreciate the support that Waypoint has also offered, because I've had some renovations done to my house recently, and Dave Cannell, who works at Outpatients, he built a couple of ramps, and he knows what he's doing. You picked the right guy. He knows what he's doing. They're great ramps. They are. So, with that said, I guess it's maybe time to show the clip, I guess, eh? Yeah.
Hi, this is the Waypoint Centre for Mental Health Care Outpatient Services team, friends and family. And we are participating in the Ice Bucket Challenge. #EveryAugust till a cure, in support of our friend and colleague in the ALS Association of Canada. Money raised from donations has made a significant impact for people diagnosed with ALS. Please help us keep the momentum going and donate to our team, OPS for ALS, on the ALS Association Canada website. Thank you for helping to make a difference. One, two, three.
That was a very memorable day, that's for sure. Yeah, very memorable. And it's Yeah, that was a day to remember, and it was just, I can't thank the outpatient team and Waypoint enough for doing that. That was, and they raised quite a bit of money as well. There's a lot of money that was raised there. I mean, that wheelchair, I don't know how much it costs, although I doubt it's cheap. I mean, it works. It works pretty well. It does. It's scary, but it works. And that's the part where, oh yeah, let me just say one more last thing. No, because when people say that and you go on and on and on. Like, I was by the way, the red jacket that was shown in one of those clips, that's the red jacket back there. And it does help with the grieving, because I used to wear that red jacket quite a bit. This one as well. I prefer this one. But I like that one. And so, oh yeah, that was what I was going to say as well. In setting up this clip, Ruth and I talked a little bit about the challenge. And in that clip, she didn't mention my name. And I asked her, we talked about it, and I said, it's too real. That's how much of a shock the diagnosis was. Because I didn't want my name to be tied to ALS. It was too frightening for me. So I asked Ruth, and speaking of respect, lot of respect, and yeah, so that's why she didn't mention my name. So, a bit of behind the scenes footage, I guess you'd call it, right? So, I'm just trying to think if there's anything I've forgotten that's already here. It's occurred to me that, yeah, by being here, it's a rare experience, all this is. And I'm sure it wouldn't surprise you if I said it's not always fun. It's not. Sometimes it's awful with the disease. And at the same time, no, it is an honor to have been invited here to Waypoint, because who knows, maybe this is the most important social work I've done. And I guess for me, when it comes to alternative treatments, what matters to me most at the end of the day, I tried. Thanks.
Wow. One of the things which Barry and I have talked a lot about is how great a speaker he is. And he gets a twinkle in his eye. And we've really seen that today. Thank you so much for coming and sharing and talking about this, talking about your journey, talking about the impact that we all have on our clients, on our families. It's enormous. It really is. We do really important work. Doesn't matter what role you're in. Whether you're in housekeeping, keeping the areas clean, whether you're Carol Lambie as our president and CEO, it is really important work. And thank you all so much for coming. Now, were you open to any questions?
Oh,
or?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Sure.
Did anybody have anything they wanted to ask Barry? Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you the mic because it's a wee bit difficult to hear.
What does ALS stand for?
Amyotrophic lateral. Oh, wait till that's what it stands for. That sound is what it's no. It's amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's amyotrophic lateral, right, Sarah? Amyotrophic, yeah. It's amazing when you had a disease for 2.5 years and you don't know what the name of it is exactly. Yeah. So, yeah. Hey. I was 42. Yeah. It's funny because it's like when I was diagnosed, it's like, talk about revealing an embarrassing thing, right? It's like, you know your age, you always know your age, right? Since diagnosis, there are times when it's like, how old am I? Like, I don't even know. So I was born in 1973 in November, so I don't know what the hell that is, but let's say it's 41. I don't know, do the calculation, I don't know. But yeah, that's relatively young though. It is relatively young, yeah. Yeah.
A little off topic, but I was just going to say, I also like your jacket. It's
You can't have that, man. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Oh, you said what's the branding of it? Oh, it's Tommy Hilfiger. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a gift. Yeah, yeah, I like it too. Yeah, I like the combination of red and black. I guess I don't want to get too much off topic, but yeah, I like the combination of red and black. No problem. Yeah. Hey.
Everything happened in 2015. I remember like we got to know each other a lot, and you know we're in this field I think for a lot of different reasons. But you and I, you know, like we were always like talking about CBT and you know different type of strategies we're helping with our clients and stuff like that. And you know what I see, like I've been really interested in the concept of resilience, and I see resilience when I talk to you, seeing you speak in front of us. And I'm just, you know, I talk to clients about this too, and I'm wondering, like, do you use that stuff? Like, what do you find useful as you've been going through this?
Like in terms of coping, more or less.
Like, kind of like just get down to the raw grit. Like, is it, I don't want to say it's BS because it's not, but have you used stuff that you've learned as a mental health clinician?
Yeah,
while
like
you've been going through this?
Like CBT, DBT, that kind of stuff.
Any of the strategies, that relaxed breathing.
Yeah.
I don't know, just anything. Like, what do you use to cope?
Definitely. I found that narrative therapy, I had no idea how much narrative therapy really helped. Like I took it through Del Hingscrest, and I really like the idea of detaching yourself from the disease, and that stems more into the identity part. DBT I found especially very helpful as well, because looking at that chair and getting that chair emotionally, it's gut-wrenching. I thought, oh my God, like, am I actually going to get a power wheelchair? Is this where this is going? So emotionally it's gut-wrenching, although you reach a certain point where you realize that it's becoming too risky. You just don't want to, I just don't want to take any more risks. So the DBT has been very useful as well. CBT, sure. Fortune-telling error, or should error, right? God should not have diagnosed me with this, or this should not have happened in my life. A lot of should statements. Fortune-telling, tons of fortune-telling. Yeah, tons and tons and tons of stuff that I've used, yeah. And it does help, although I'd have to say that DBT and narrative therapy stand out as probably the best. Thanks, Dustin.
Other questions?
Hey.
So much for coming today. I agree with, well, I think we all share the same sentiment that you are incredibly courageous. You were a fantastic, wonderful social worker and still are. How do you maintain that sense of humor? You've always had it. It hasn't left you. I know this is along the same lines as the question that Dustin asked, but I mean, you're a wonderful, wonderful person, and we all appreciate your sense of humor.
Well, thanks for saying that. I think it's a coping way. I do. I think it's almost like an impulse. It's a way of, I think of a joke, then I just want to tell it. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you want people to laugh, you do. Yeah, if people don't laugh, then it's kind of like, oh, okay. It's like, and that's part about expectations. It's like, okay, people are going to laugh at this joke. You tell them that nobody laughs. Like, okay. But no, I think it's like a survival thing in a way, although it's always been there for me, or I like a sense of humor. I've like comedians, all that kind of stuff. Oh, largely for me, it's more coping, and I think it's just a part of my personality. And one other thing too, in terms of the talk, and what I talked about earlier, there's been a lot of things that have changed about me, right? My beliefs have changed, my personality in this. More anger? Yeah, there is. If I sound angry at times, I don't know, like there is anger there is. You know, so having said that though, it's yeah, it's a way to cope, and it's a way to escape briefly to enjoy yourself, just even as for a few seconds. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks though, Allison.
Well, I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to see you.
We'll have to do another summer party again.
Yeah, that's right. I know.
Any other questions for Barry? Okay. So Barry, thank you so much for coming today. It really has been absolutely wonderful to have you here. And he has very graciously said he's going to come again on Thursday, so that we're sort of hitting a couple of different groups of staff, which is really, really generous of you. And we're really happy that you've been able to do this and share your wisdom and your knowledge and your thoughts, which is just fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just remind people that there is a book up at the back if you want to write a wee note in it or anything like that. And we'll have it available throughout the week.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming, and we're going to have the privilege of seeing you here on Thursday again.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you so much, Ruth. Thank you. Sure, yeah.